Alright, so here we're coming up on the edges of it. So, let's see, this is just the real temporary construction of motors that I mentioned. I've just been pulling wire and steel pipes out of dimensional storage and hand-feeding them into containers over here. It's definitely not ideal, probably especially for the wire. I should have just built this somewhere where I had an actual copper node nearby. But it is at least slowly churning out motors. But I am going to need a whole lot of them. So the other thing that's based here is our sulfur extraction. So we've got impure, normal, and pure, as we mentioned before, and those all get merged onto a single Mark IV belt. And then that goes over this belt construct bridge thing that I built up to head off down here to be turned into compacted coal. So we have the coal coming up from over there, very similar setup, and then coming up this belt here, and it's going to get routed into all of these assemblers. So if my math is correct, and I suppose more accurately if Satisfactory Modeler's math is correct, because I've been using that pretty extensively now, then it should be 20 assemblers that I need to make this. Actually, I think I'm underclocking some of these a bit. I have to double check that. Yes, so upon further review, these are all going to get underclocked to 96%, and that's just to get the ratios down the line to work out a bit better. I didn't quite need 20 assemblers, and I want to say that a slight underclock across a whole bunch of machines is more efficient than an aggressive underclock on one machine. I'll have to double check that, because it could be the opposite depending on how it scales. But yeah, so compacted coal should be getting constructed up here, and then I am going to belt that down to here. And the other raw resource that we need for this setup, which you can see is pretty extensive, is oil. So oil is coming from these oil wells out here. I keep getting enemies spawning in back near my construction, which is a bit of a drag. But these oil wells pump down into here. I've got a bit of load balancing going on between each of these pipes, as you can see, like there and there. The goal, I think, is to have each of these pipes running at 270 per minute. So 4 pipes, all at 270 per minute. And that should allow me to split these into groups of 4 across my fuel production, which is up at the top of this structure here. Yeah, I sort of structured this whole thing in terms of groups of 4, at least wherever I could. So this main structure has these like 4 wings off of it, and each has 8 refineries that are going to produce turbo fuel. And then up top, I have 20 refineries, which are going to produce standard fuel, and I've sort of subdivided them into groups of 5. So each oil pipe should be hitting a group of 5 of these. 4, 5. And then, similarly, I've grouped their fuel outputs into groups of 5. So I've been using these copper-colored pipes for the standard fuel, and I believe each section of 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, has been hooked up to a shared pipe and then goes down through the floor to the level below. So yeah, that's all the oil coming up here. I pumped it into some fluid buffers, though I don't really think that's necessary. Figured why not give it a little bit of surplus, just in case we have some sort of outage. But again, I very much doubt it will be necessary for this setup. And as with my previous design, I really tried to basically get all of the head lift at the start. So the oil gets pumped up all the way to the top of the structure, and then the liquid fuel that's produced all flows down from there. So the point being that I basically only need the 4 pumps that are down here to give me all of the head lift for the entire turbo fuel production process. There is one exception, which is water, that's going to be producing some plastic and rubber, more or less as a byproduct of this, because fuel production creates polymer resin. So I need to have somewhere for that to go, and I figured I might as well, produce something useful out of that, plastic and rubber, rather than just sinking it, for example. Alright, so if we follow down, so yeah, this is just oil coming in, fuel and polymer resin coming out, and then the compacted coal will be coming in on this level, I think, from over there. So we can see each of these pipes is a fuel pipe coming in from up top, and each should have 5 refineries outputting to it. And then that flows down to a bank of 8 refineries, which will then produce turbo fuel. So yeah, that's going to require compacted coal and fuel, and then turbo fuel is the only product, and that turbo fuel will flow out from here. And again, as I mentioned, I'm just trying to structure this where all of the fluids get produced up high and then flow down to a lower level, including the turbo fuel. So the turbo fuel is going to punch out on each side, and each of these 4 sections is structured symmetrically. Going to punch out on each side, and then flow around, under, merge into a single pipe for each of the 4 sections, and then come around underneath here. And over on this side we can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 outlets for this. And it's going to flow out over this way, and then my plan is to put the last step, the fuel generators, out here on each of these massive platforms that I've made. Oh yeah, and I've got a single geothermal over here that's chugging away, but it's not even hooked up to anything yet. I plan to bridge that across to our variable power network here before long. But yeah, I think each of these platforms that I've constructed, if I've measured them out correctly, can hold 20 fuel generators for a total of 80 across 4 platforms, which is crazy. And this is where my need for motors comes, because every single fuel generator needs 15 motors. So if we look at the total for that, 80 times 15 is 1,200 motors in total. And yeah, this is something I just really hadn't thought about. I had a backlog of motors from some of my earlier production, so I assumed I would be fine. But yeah, I just did not register that I was going to be building 80 fuel generators for this, and how many motors that would turn into. So yeah, I've been grabbing motors off of that production line, that little ramshackle production up there, as often as I can, and refilling it. But I've only got, 234 so far? So this is why I'm debating finally using some some of those fix-it coupons at the awesome shop for parts, because while all of the other production for this is either automated nowadays, like the encased industrial beams, or I have a significant backlog of like quick wire, I think I'd be fine on, because I have like a massive container full of that feeding into a dimensional depot back near the hub. Motors are the blocker, at least I think. So we'll see. I'm going to try expanding this out, and we'll see if I really am bottlenecked entirely on motors. And if I am, I might at least spend some amount of coupons just to get this fully up and running. Now, of course, I could just put down however many fuel generators I have components for, and then start up the power plant and let it run at not 100% efficiency. And then, build some actual automation of motors, come back to this. But I think I'd rather not break it up like that. I kind of, since I've been working on this project for a while now, I kind of just want to see it through and finish it off and not have to remember to come back here and expand out the actual generators. So we'll see. Let's see, what else? While I've been in this area, I've been running across a few artifacts. There's a Mercer sphere right over there, and I haven't picked any of those up yet because I was worried about dialogue lines triggering and not getting a recording of it. So I'm going to finally pick those up and get them out of the way so that I can actually build out this area.
Are your vessels functional or recreational?
Mostly functional.
A cog in the machine?
Correct, a hog in the woods.
The vessel is blood.
Fascinating. Yes, I think they are. They are conduits, builders, breakers, defenders, and aggressors, cells within a larger organism. We do not share a body.
Harmony.
Interesting. So yeah, talking about me, basically. At least that's my assumption. Let's see, what else was there? I think there's another Mercer sphere. It's just been hanging up on a ridge near here. Yeah, there it is. Might as well grab that. But yeah, Ada seems less ominous than she once did. Still mean, but
This bleeding temple hums a resident song. Play for us.
new there. And then, most importantly, I know there is a Summers loop right down here where I'm planning to build something. Probably an awesome sink down here. I guess we'll see. Okay, nothing new there. And yeah, I have been going and picking up hard drives out of the crashed freighters that are littered around this area. Well, I guess... Well, because I spent a fair bit of time on it, I was figuring maybe I will try building one of these conveyor support sections on camera, because I really like the way that this turned out. I don't need this anymore. This was me considering belting all the way with foundations before I settled on this approach instead. So yeah, obviously you could do this a lot simpler if you just suspend the conveyor in the air, but I wanted to make it look decent, and I think it does with this approach. And yeah, it's way, way, way easier as well than trying to line up foundations for the whole way, because then you're stuck building exactly on a grid, whereas with this, I can just more or less look where I want it to go, and then send a belt that whole distance. So I think, for example, I'm gonna want compacted coal to go from here probably out to there. Okay, so we're going to try out building one of these connections again. First time around I made a handful of mistakes, so I figured I would try to get a cleaner description of it. So what we're doing is we're trying to route a conveyor from here all the way down to there, to that window down there. And this is going to carry compacted coal, I think at 480 per minute, I think max of a Mark IV. So the way that I have been doing this is I start by building a support that's going to extend a little bit of ways away from the conveyor wall hole here. So what I do is I find the snap point down in one of the corners of this, either side, and then I go one further away from that, and then I drag out. I've been doing 10 meters. I don't believe this distance really matters. It's just enough to sort of pull the initial conveyor away from the structure so that I've got a nice clean area to send it between buildings with. And then I do a very similar thing. I just snap a second beam down one level below that. Now, the reason why I'm doing this setup and two beams instead of one beam is because of how the conveyor wall supports work. So if I drag a conveyor off of here and I point at the top beam here, really anywhere on the top beam, you'll see that the conveyor support snaps between the two beams, essentially. So if I only have one, this ends up looking like that, which I didn't really care for. So two beams seemed to just work out better and have the conveyor sandwiched in between them. And then also the gap of one snap point to the side of, let's put you just there for now. This doesn't matter too much at the start. But the gap one to the side is so that this distance of the conveyor wall mount aligns nicely. Because instead, if I didn't do that, it would have a very, very obvious bend. You can see it's got a slight bend as it is. You're going to have some amount of angle regardless, I think. Unless you do something very fancy with placing those initial beams. For me, one snap point over, extending out, seems to work well enough that I don't think it's going to bother me really at all. Shoot it there. And yeah, that looks decent. So now the next step is to line up on our target position. So I'm gonna go off on the end of the beam here, and I'm going to attach to that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and turn this to freeform mode, meaning it'll just line up wherever I'm pointing. And I'm going to head to the other end where we want this to connect to. And as you can see, I've already pre-placed some beams there, using exactly the same process as above, to act as our target point. So I'm still in the process of building that freeform beam. It's still following my mouse around as I move. So if I come all the way down here, look directly at the target where I want it to end up, and then click, that means that way back up here, it should have built a beam that is pointing exactly at that target position where we want our connection to end up. Certainly looks good. Won't know for sure until we get all the way down there, unfortunately, but so long as you do that process of free form and then pointing exactly where you want it to end up, it should line up. So now the issue is to get the second beam underneath it, and we want that beam to be exactly aligned to the direction and length of this one. And that can get a little complicated, because I previously would have just repeated the same process, stick a beam off here, go all the way down to the bottom, point at the second beam down there, and that might work, but I had weird issues with very, very slight angle differences between these two, or very, very slight differences in terms of the length of the beams. So like the end point of the second beam would be ever so slightly shorter or longer than this one above it, I assume, again, because of just slight differences in angle. So what I've taken to doing instead, just to avoid this altogether, is I take a big concrete pillar and I stick it off the end there. You see, you can snap along the length, in which case it's oriented vertically, but if you snap off the end, it matches the angle of the beam, which is exactly what I'm looking for. So now what I can do is come down here and point at this surface, and just one notch below where this beam is attaching, and I can, using default mode, stretch back 40 meters. And now, what that guarantees is that the ends of these are perfectly aligned with one another. This secondary beam started one snap point lower on a perfectly aligned surface, so I shouldn't have any differences in terms of the angle of these two beams or the point at which they stop here. So now what I can do is take this, and I'm just going to extend it off to here. And the way I've been doing this is just pointing right at the end of the uppermost beam, and that should work out pretty good. Once the support is in there, I can always change the belt and add in more supports and such. Point being, if this bend isn't exactly where you want it or something like that, it's something you can change after the fact. I just always leave the wall support behind when I do that, so that I have it as a point of reference. So now the task is to build the actual support for this. So the way I've been doing that is by building off the end of the upper beam again and extending down some distance. I think this depends on the angle at which you're building, as in the slope of this going towards the target. Because I want to say that over there I would pull this down 4 meters, and that worked out well enough. But I think for this slope, something like 3 meters will work out better. So what I'm going to do is take a small metal pillar, pop it off the end of that, and then pop it up top, replacing that section of beam. And that should poke just a bit up over this beam coming in and give us a spot to build the full support pillar off of. So now I'm just going to zoop down from there into the ground. The height of this is a little funny, so I guess I'll just punch all the way through down to there. And there. So that is the first section built. So now the second section here is a little bit different. Oh, and actually, I'm realizing what you'll do when you're continuing this yourself is I would recommend like dragging that beam down, putting the start of the support pillar here, then deleting that beam and not building this one up just yet. I would do that last. Because what we're going to do is we're going to take these small frame pillars and use them as a base to continue our beams off of, extending them down towards the target. The reason why we do that, just for reference, is that if I take a beam and just point at the end of these other ones, I can build off the end of it, but if I have it in this default mode, it wants to go horizontal or vertical, rather than in alignment with the angle we've already set. But that changes if you're building off a pillar. It's the same reason I was using that big concrete pillar earlier. So by snapping, let's see if I can get it right. There, finally got a snap off the end there. So now we have these frame pillars encasing each of these beam endpoints. And what I'm going to do is come up here and point right at the end of the beam, but it's actually attaching to the pillar, the frame pillar instead. And you can see that when I pull out in default mode, it actually follows that angle exactly, that slope. So that is how I can extend these and make sure that they're perfectly aligned, and I just pull them out to 40 meters. I'm sure, any distance would work. It's just 40 is the max, so it's a nice, convenient way to get an exact distance. And yeah, now this should match exactly the angle that we were working with before. So now it's just a matter of continuing this process. Alright, so we're coming up on the end here, and now that we're within 40 meters, the way that I've found that I think works best for completing this is actually just to point here, go back to freeform mode, and point directly at the end of each beam. Now, I'm sure you could just continue this in the same way that we have been, but I believe that the issue I would run into, at least sometimes, is that the length of this wouldn't necessarily match up in a way that I liked. So this is fine, but every once in a while it would be like, a little awkwardly short, a little awkwardly long. That one doesn't look bad at all, but at the very least, doing it this way, starting here in freeform, and then just hooking up directly to that, works every time as far as I can tell. So now it's just a matter of getting this routed into the end there. So, figure what I'll do is just put in a support there, and then do a very similar process here, extending down, putting in a pillar, that on top, and now let's see how that goes, how that looks going straight in. That looks fine to me. It's like clipping just a little bit. I have, on each one, getting the belt placement at the start and end is always just a little bit different. But you know, so long as it's close enough, that is fine by me. So yeah, that is that done. And what I have been doing as well, actually, I figure I'll show you, is I've been running power across the top of these. It just seems like a convenient place to put it. So I put double wall outlet there, and then just mark ones in the center of each pillar, and string power lines between each. And yeah, makes a very convenient way to transport belts and power. Right, and yeah, just ending it on this end with another double outlet. And there we go. So yeah, at least once I actually have compacted coal getting produced, this will be I think, a pretty nice looking way to transport that conveyor all the way between these buildings, along with acting as a power line to connect the two. And yeah, I'm certainly not saying this is the best way to do it, but I like how this looks, and it is, at least I think, it's actually easier than dealing with building the whole thing on foundations between the two. Sometimes that's not bad, you know, if you're building everything snapped to the world grid anyway. But I like this quite a bit more. So yeah, hopefully this at least gives you some ideas for similar things that you could build. Beams seem incredibly versatile for constructing things at odd angles and, you know, not exactly on a grid. So yeah, well, I am going to continue on building this thing up. There's still a fair bit of work to be done, especially with laying out fuel generators out on these platforms. So I will probably be coming back to you once I think we're in a position to turn this place on and start actually producing power. Oh yeah, I haven't mentioned this before though. So at some point there was an update to the game. At least I believe that's when it happened. And when I loaded into my save after that update, a whole bunch of these Mercer spheres, along with, I believe, some power slugs, had reappeared in the world. And I can tell, especially with the Mercer spheres, because normally they have like a sort of encasing element that attaches to the ground and then, you know, surrounds the sphere up here, but that's gone in these cases. They're just hanging out there. So you might have noticed them around. They've been around for quite a bit, and I've been trying to decide how to approach those. In fact, I think there's one way out there. Yep, sure looks like it. So yeah, I've been trying to decide how to approach these, because I could certainly use more Mercer spheres, but it feels a bit like cheating, because these definitely should not have reappeared like this. So I may just leave them for now. I'm not certain. I'm a little worried also that collecting these will trigger additional dialogue lines that maybe I, should, for example, only be getting when I get, like, the last Mercer sphere, for example. I'm not entirely sure how that'll work. Maybe I'll look into it a bit more. So long as I don't think it's gonna, mess with the game experience too much, maybe I'll just collect them and put them all in a box or something like that. With the power slugs, I can't even keep track of it, because there's no indication whether it's one that I picked up previously or not. So I'm just not going to worry about it with those. I'll just, so for example, I'm pretty basically certain that I got this one before, but it's back again. But there's going to be so many cases where I can't keep track of that. And I think I've already picked up some, probably twice already. So I'm just not going to worry about it in the case of the power slugs. It does mean I'll have some extra power shards available, but really, I've been using so few of them that I don't really expect it to make a huge difference. Anyhow, we're getting back over to the power plant over here, and you can probably see already that a fair bit has changed in terms of the aesthetics of all of this. I did build up a building over here, and that's where compacted coal is going to get made. And then, yeah, finally finished surrounding the whole main power plant assembly down there. And then we've got the fields of fuel generators. There should be 80 of those in total, split up between 4 platforms with 20 each. And I think I have everything hooked up as well, such that I can power it up, though nothing has been powered up yet. But all of these should be ready. I think this is just a redundant power pole here from where I had some motor production going here before, just laid out on the ground. And yeah, luckily, I didn't end up using many fix-it tickets on motors. I don't know if you remember, but I was debating that last time because I needed a ton of motors to make all those fuel generators. And I think I maybe spent like 10 tickets, something like that. And I've still got like 113 in my pockets and more in the awesome sinks ready to be picked up. So I didn't end up using many, just a few motors to push me over the line on building the last handful of those fuel generators because it was just taking so long. But yeah, so to go through it before we start turning on the power, here's where the sulfur is getting mined, and we should have 480 per minute going along this belt. And on the other side of it, we should have 480 per minute coal coming up from here. And both of these go into this single structure, and then it gets pretty dense in here. Not to go through all the belting, but basically I just take each of these belts of coal and then sulfur on the other side and split it evenly between 4 belt sections, and then feed each of those into 5 assemblers, which should all be set to make compacted coal at a slight underclock, 24 per minute per assembler, so that we should end up with... that makes a lot more sense. So yeah, 480 per minute total output, because I think the ratio of ingredients is the same. So yeah, like 5 of each of these to make 5 compacted coal, so the total output is 480 as well. And yeah, you can see the belt work is a little dense in here, and it's especially hard to read with the lights not working yet. But let's just go down this ladder real quick to show the lower level. Oh no, there's a beam stuck in here. Why? You weren't in here when I built the place. How do you do this? But yeah, here's the whole lower level. So we got another 5, and another 5. So 15 total assemblers down here on the bottom floor. So let's follow that now. Down into the power plant proper. So yeah, this plant on the upper floor is making fuel, and that's coming from oil lines coming in over there. And then on the lower floor is where the turbo fuel is actually getting made. Suppose I already went through most of this last time, but figured it was worth showing what it looks like nowadays. And yeah, I think, assuming I've got everything hooked up properly, I should have all the power routed and everything. So, for starting this place up, I have a much simpler procedure in mind than my startup for the good old coal plant that we've been running off of this whole time. And my idea was, nowadays, I've got this variable power network, which has geothermal power, constantly ramping up and down, and a fair number, not a huge number, but a fair number of batteries backing it. And my thinking is to use that network to jumpstart the power plant. So my plan is to bridge my variable network to the internal network of the plant. And I'm not bothering to really segment out different elements of the plant. It's just going to be the whole plant network. Every single machine, all the lights, everything, and the generators themselves on one network. And my idea is that that might be a little bit much in terms of total load for the variable power network to handle, but it does have those batteries, which should hold it for at least a while. And also, once everything starts propagating through the plant, the fuel generators themselves should start to run and provide supplementary power. So it should slowly take over, basically, to the point where the batteries won't have to hold us forever. And then once the plant has fully started up, we'll go ahead and bridge it to the main power network over here. You can see this is down here on grid B is our main network. It's only at about half utilization right now because the exotics factory is basically idle, or completely idle, honestly, because it doesn't have an awesome sink set up for it yet. I was worried that adding in that awesome sink and having it running continuously would finally cause this network to collapse. So I just left it alone. But yeah, once we have this up and running off the variable network, I'll bridge it over to the standard network, then disconnect this one, and hopefully we'll be operational. So let's go ahead and give it a try. Alright, lights are on. Everything is spiking up. Yeah, our max theoretical consumption has gone way, way up. But yeah, we shouldn't have everything running yet. Yes, and I've got this hypertube set up to take me up to the top floor, which is now actually powered. So the first thing I want to look at is oil. Oh, well, there's a problem. That isn't connected, but now it is. Anyhow, though, we should have 2 oil wells up there producing, 2 oil wells over here, one of which is overclocked, one there, and we've got some little pipe merging and balancing with valves going on here, with the goal being that each of these pipes heading out should end up with a flow rate of, I want to say it's 270 per minute. And right now it is higher on a fair number of these, but they should eventually average out to that. Looks like our pumps are just starting to work. A bunch of Mark II pumps here. Should just be starting to push the oil up top here. Right. And in the meantime, we should be getting extraction of sulfur and coal. I see green lights over there. And that should start producing compacted coal, which you can see just barely making its way down this line and into the power plant. And then, meanwhile, on the upper floor, that oil should be getting turned into fuel. Ooh, it's a little hard to scoot through there. Not seeing... Oh, there's a little bit of movement on these pipes here, so there should be some amount of fuel. Yeah, starting to make its way down. I'm sure it's going to take a bit for everything to get running properly. And then any polymer resin produced off that process should be heading this way into here for production of rubber, I believe, on this side. Yeah. Oh gosh. I don't think I ever ran power to those pumps down there for water. Just a sec. Power to there. Okay, alright, so we should finally be getting water flowing up through here and into these areas, and that should allow these machines to actually start up. And yeah, each of these is designed in the same way, where the products flow all the way down to the far end to a smart splitter, which is set to output over here, where there is nothing attached currently, because I don't know what I want to do with this plastic and rubber yet. But then it'll overflow back down along the top here and into this awesome sink. So for now, we're just going to be destroying a lot of these resources, which is for sure a waste. I just need to find a way to get them out of here. I'm debating having like a train come along this side eventually, something like that. Maybe out suspended across this canyon. I'm not sure. But for now, I just need to make sure to get all of this polymer resin consumed so that it doesn't back up and prevent production of fuel. Okay, we've got our turbo fuel production actually starting up. Let me check on the network. Okay, so we're getting some increases to our consumption, but it looks like our fuel generators are actually starting to switch on. Yeah, starting up intermittently at least. I do wonder if we could just safely dump this onto the main grid already, but it's still running very inconsistently. So maybe I'll give this a while, let all of the manifolds back up, let all of the pipes fill, and show it to you when it's actually operating smoothly. Right, well, here we are back again, and I think that everything is finally running without issue. So there were a lot of tiny issues initially at the start. So the biggest ones were that there were a handful of spots where I had simply left belts or lifts, especially lifts, that were too low of a level. So like, for example, here, these two belts on each side are Mark IIIs, and I had simply forgotten that I had left Mark I conveyor lifts sitting here off each side. So that was a significant problem. Luckily, I found that one pretty quick. There were a handful of other similar locations, but I finally think... Oh, let's get the lights back on in here. I think I turned night mode on, which might have been a mistake. Much better. So yeah, I think everything is finally running well. You can see we've got full fuel pipes feeding down in here, and then the turbo fuel itself is going through pipes out to each of the fields of power generators. Yeah, I think everything has been running for a bit now, long enough that I'm pretty comfortable saying that it's working smoothly. Yeah, just to check up on here one last time, I had some backups here initially, again as a result of some slow components down the line, but I think I'm not getting any such backups anymore. which is good. These belts should, I believe, be running at maximum capacity, so no gaps. But, yeah, any backup at all would cause fuel production to shut down ever so momentarily. And yeah, as mentioned before, our plastic and rubber is just being diverted directly into this awesome sink for now. I'm gonna have to figure out something more appropriate to do with that at some point. But yeah, I figured I would just give a little view of the whole thing running. I'm pretty proud of how this turned out. It's definitely not the most inventively constructed building, but I like how this thing has turned out. And I think it's finally time to transfer it over to the proper network. So let's take a look at this. So yeah, our current running network has a maximum production of 3,190 megawatts by the look at it. I'm not sure exactly where all of that is coming from, because I thought I only had 32 coal generators. I must be forgetting some form of power production. Oh, of course, it's from the boost, right? Well, regardless, it doesn't matter. I have this much, and we're going to a very, very significantly increased amount of power production. Slightly less than what's shown here, because I do plan to separate these networks and have, the variable network with its geothermal generators stay separate. But this should still be a significant increase. Let's actually bridge these. Nothing crashed, no batteries are being drained. And you can see that jump there. Woo. So yeah, this is not quite going to be an order of magnitude increase in our power production, but very close. And now we can segment these networks, separate them again. Now we should be left with all of our geothermal production on this network. Right? Then our stable power production on this network. So yeah, it looks like our total production on the static network is just over 25 gigawatts. Up from 3.19. So, yeah, very, very significant increase. And yeah, everything still continues to run. So I think we are doing just fine. And hopefully, so long as we've designed this correctly, that's now a nice, stable amount of power production available for our future projects. So glad to finally have this up and running. It feels like I've been working on this for quite a long time now. But yeah, I think the next step will be thinking about the electronics factory, which I'd been planning to build quite some time ago. And that's going to involve production of things like circuit boards and computers, especially. But yeah, I think that's going to be next. I was trying to decide how best to differentiate that from the rest of our factories. So for the Essentials factory, I more or less just built that as a single box unit, pulled in all the resources, and manufactured everything all in one building. And then for the Exotics factory, I went down the route of having a variety of buildings sort of spread out over a large area with resources various production tiers flowing between them. I'm thinking that for the electronics factory, maybe a way to go with a, differentiated design would be to go with a more vertical building. Probably still all one. Ooh, nearly fell off there. But probably still all one building unit, sort of like the Essentials factory, but maybe like a much more vertically oriented factory. And part of the reason why I'm thinking along those lines, just jump off here and sort of get an aerial survey. The Exotics factory, the Essentials factory, our fuel and oil product depot over there, which will certainly have to be updated at some point. But part of the reason why I'm thinking of building the electronics factory out here with some amount of verticality is that it is seeming like Satisfactory is going to be getting an update here before too long to version 1.1, and that update looks like it's going to include things like vertical splitters and mergers, as well as elevators. So I'm really excited to build with those components, at least once they actually become available. So I'm thinking of trying to integrate those into this new electronics factory. Now that we have an actual, robust power network once again to deal with. Yes, and of course I am going to have to go back through here and add in an awesome sink for one, so that this thing is always producing these resources instead of just having them sitting here idle on the belts like they are now. Then, gonna move on to designing the electronics factory and updating this one. Maybe finalizing some of the cosmetics over here too. And looking forward to seeing all of you next time, making use of some of this new turbo fuel power we have available. All right. Talk to you all soon. That's going to be the end of today's episode. Thank you all for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next one.